People often say that money changes people, but the truth is, it only reveals who they really are. My name is David Lawson, and I am, or at least I was, one of the richest men in Africa. My life looked perfect from the outside. I owned 3 companies, cars, 2 private jets, and several estates across the continent. But what I didn't have was peace. My wife, Clara, was beautiful, the kind of woman whose presence could silence a room. I met her at a charity event 7 years ago. She smiled at me like she had known me forever, and I was swept off my feet. Within a few months, we got married, but over the years, that charming woman I fell in love with had changed, or maybe she had only removed her marks. Clara never worked a day in her life after marriage. I didn't mind at first. I wanted her to enjoy life. But what I didn't know was that I had also invited her mother, Rose, into my home for good. Rose was loud, bossy, and never satisfied. They acted like queens in a palace, and I was the king they didn't respect. Every week, they sacked and replaced the domestic staff. Most were dismissed without pay. I once overheard my cook crying quietly in the servants' quarters. "Madam didn't let me eat anything today, even after I finished cooking," she whispered to the cleaner. "And I've been here since around 4 a.m. It broke my heart. Clara and her mother spent my money like it was falling from the sky. Designer clothes, expensive perfumes, diamonds, jewelries. They even brought a pure gold toilet seat for the guest bathroom. I'm not joking. When I complained, Clara said, "What's the point of being rich if I can't live like royalty?" I began to wonder, what if I lost everything tomorrow? Would they still love me, or would they throw me away like trash? That thought stayed with me. I couldn't shake it off. I had given them everything, comfort, luxury, and the kind of life people only see in movies, and yet I was treated like an outsider in my own house. No respect, no kindness, and no warmth. One night, I sat alone in my study. The chandelier above me sparkled like the stars, but my heart felt empty. What if all this is fake? I whispered to myself. What if I've married wrong? And then it came to me, a plan, a dangerous one, but I needed to know the truth. I needed to see how deep their love really went. So I called my lawyer and my most trusted employee, Frank. He was like a brother to me. I told them my plan: to fake an accident, lose my company shares in a stage fraud investigation, freeze my bank accounts, and act as if I became crippled in the process. Frank stared at me. "Are you sure, sir? This is serious." "I need to know, Frank," I said, my voice low. "Before I die, I need to know who really loves me." Frank nodded slowly. "Then we'll do it," he said. "I'll make the arrangements." The setup began. 3 weeks later, I made my move. That morning, Clara and Rose were at the hospital for Rose's routine checkup. While they waited at the reception, sipping fruit juice and gossiping, I made the emergency call. 10 minutes later, a nurse rushed into the waiting area. "Are you the wife of Mr. David Lawson?" the nurse asked with so much agitation. Clara stood up immediately. "Yes, what happened?" "There's been a serious accident," the nurse said. "Please come with me." Clara froze. Her hands began to tremble. Rose let out a sharp scream. "Accident? What kind of accident?" They were rushed into the emergency room, and there I was, lying on a hospital bed with blood smeared on my bandaged forehead, my legs strapped, a neck brace holding my head up, and tubes running from both arms. I looked broken, almost lifeless. Clara screamed, "David! Oh my God, David!" Rose fell to her knees and began to wail. "No, God forbid! Who did this to my son-in-law?" The nurses held them back. The doctor entered with a grim look on his face. "Please calm down," he said softly. "He survived, but there's something you need to know." Clara covered her mouth. The doctor sighed and continued. "We've done all we can. He will live, but he won't walk again. The accident crushed his spine. He's crippled for life." Clara screamed and dropped to the floor. Rose fainted on the spot. It was very chaotic. The second blow. 2 days later, I was still in the hospital, pretending to be unconscious while listening to everything around me. Clara stayed beside the bed, wiping my fake tears with a towel. Rose paced around the room like a restless ghost. Then something happened. One of my employees, Daniel, who was part of the plan, came rushing into the room. Sir, he said breathlessly, eyes full of fake panic. Please, I don't know who else to call. Clara stood up. What's going on? She asked. Daniel shook his head. The company, it's gone. The government is investigating for fraud and money laundering. They've frozen the accounts. They've seized the buildings. Sir David is no longer the majority shareholder. They pushed him out. Everything is gone. The silence was loud. Clara blinked rapidly. Rose clutched her chest. What? What did you say? Daniel dropped to his knees. They are saying all his assets are under review. The cars, the houses, the bank accounts, they are all under government control. Clara's legs buckled and she hit the floor. No, that's not possible. Rose began to cry. Jesus, what kind of curse is this? The nurses came running again. Clara was shaking and Rose was gasping for air. And me? I was still lying in the bed, eyes shut, heart quietly listening. Now I have seen what I needed to see. Their reaction to losing wealth was louder than their concern for my health. And that was all the answer I needed. The real test began after 2 weeks. I was discharged from the hospital. A wheelchair was given to me. The doctor reminded them again, he will never walk again. You have to support him now. We got into a hired taxi and the journey was silent. Clara and her mother didn't say a word. When we arrived at my mansion, government tape was across the gate and armed officers stood guard. Clara gasped. We can't get in. I told you, I whispered weakly. They've taken everything. Rose rubbed her temples. We can't sleep on the road. Let's go to my house. And so, the mighty David Lawson, once a king in his own world, rode between his wife and her mother to a tiny 2-bedroom bungalow in the heart of the city. The paint was fading. The walls had cracks. There were no security, no driver, no luxury. The air was different, hot, heavy and full of tension. Rose looked at my wheelchair and frowned. This chair is too big. You are blocking the door. Clara walked past me like I was invisible. I rolled myself into the house alone. That night, they didn't bring me dinner. I waited and waited until my stomach ached. I finally went to the kitchen and found empty pots. Didn't you cook? I asked weakly. Rose snapped from the sitting room. Do we look like your chefs? This is not your mansion. Clara said coldly, if you want food, make it yourself. I'm not your maid. My heart cracked. The real test had begun. And so the suffering continued. The next few weeks were worse than I imagined. I wasn't allowed to watch TV because Rose said I was wasting electricity. They stopped giving me food. Sometimes I had to beg. Other times they locked the kitchen and left me starving. I would cry quietly at night while they laughed in the living room. Look at him now. Big man has become useless. To survive, I got a job as a sanitation worker. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., I wheeled myself to the streets, wore the bright orange uniform and cleaned gutters and roads. People looked at me with pity. Some gave me coins, most just ignored me. Each evening when I returned from work sweaty and hungry, Rose would collect whatever money I made. Give me the money, she would say, arms stretched out. This house isn't free. And I gave it to her every day. But the worst came one Saturday. I got home earlier than usual. I was starving. I rolled into the kitchen and saw a bowl of soup with fried chicken. My hands shook as I reached for it. I sat and began to eat slowly, tears falling from my cheeks from the taste of real food. But before I could swallow my second spoon, Rose stormed in. What do you think you're doing? She shouted, and I froze. I said, what are you eating? That's not for you, you crippled fool. Clara ran in too. He ate our food? Can you imagine? You dare touch our soup? Rose walked up to me, snatched the bowl and poured the hot soup on my head. Clara laughed. Now you know your place." I sat there, soup dripping from my face, chicken on the floor, and my heart shattered into pieces. But what they didn't know was that I had a hidden camera in my wheelchair and everything was being recorded. Every single act was being recorded by the hidden camera in my wheelchair. As the hot soup ran down my face, it burned my skin and broke what was left of my pride. Pieces of fried chicken lay on the floor. Clara stood with her arms crossed, looking angry. Rose was laughing loudly. Her laughter felt like a slap to my soul. "You think this is your palace?" Rose asked with a smirk on her face. "You should be happy we let you stay here. If I had my way, you'd be sleeping on the streets." I didn't reply. My hands shook, not from the soup, but from the pain in my heart. The woman I once loved, the one I once called my queen, had become a stranger. Her mother, Rose, was even worse. I slowly rolled myself into the small bedroom they gave me. There was no fan, no bed frame, just an old thin mattress on the floor and a cracked window. I didn't cry. Not this time. I had cried enough. Instead, I took out the small memory card from a secret place under my wheelchair. I put it in a pouch I had sewn into my clothes. I was recording everything. Every slap, every insult, and every moment I went to bed hungry. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for justice. The next morning, I woke up shaking. Rain had come in through the window and soaked my blankets. My back hurt from sleeping on the hard floor. My stomach growled, but I didn't dare ask for food. By 4 a.m., I was already out in the cold, dressed in my orange sanitation uniform. I wheeled myself down the dark street with my broom tied to the sides. The street lights above me flickered like they were tired too. People stared, some whispered, a few laughed. "Isn't that the man who owned that big house in Lekki? I heard his wife now feeds him leftovers if he's lucky." I didn't say a word. I swept the street in silence. I knew I had my plans, but I just needed time. Later that day, I returned home tired and soaked in sweat. My hands were sore, my lips were dry, and as I wheeled through the gate, Rose was waiting for me. "You are late," she said. "We've already eaten." I didn't argue. I didn't ask for food. I just rolled past her. Then Clara stepped outside. "Where's the money from today?" she asked, stretching her hand like a debt collector. I gave her the small envelope of money I had earned. She opened it, counted it, and looked at me with disgust. "This is all? For someone who leaves the house every day, you earn like a useless rat." She walked away. That night, I went to bed without food again. The insults and wickedness became normal. Sometimes they would hide my wheelchair so I'd have to crawl to the bathroom. Other times they would mix pepper into my water and laughed while I coughed. One day, Rose invited her friends over. She made me serve them drinks like a servant. When I dropped a glass, they laughed and called me Oga Crepo. Clara just sat and watched me with no emotion. At night, I would wake up in pain. My stomach would hurt from hunger. I would cry silently so no one would hear me, but the camera kept recording. I saved the videos every day. I sent them to Frank, my loyal friend. He wanted to expose them already, but I told him to wait. "Not yet," I said, in a quiet tone over a secret phone call. "Let the world see it all first." One Sunday, things got worse. Clara walked in with a shopping bag. "Who bought that?" Rose asked. "I did. I used this ID card to open a credit account at a small shop." "You used this ID?" Rose shouted. "Yes now. What's the big deal? He's useless now. I even signed the debt in his name. If they don't get their money, they will arrest him, not us." They both laughed. I was standing quietly behind the kitchen door. My heart turned cold. They weren't just abusing me anymore. They were setting me up to be arrested. I quietly rolled back into my room. A few days later, I collapsed at work. My body had had enough. I hadn't eaten well in days. A kind man took me to a small clinic. The nurse gave me glucose and told me to rest. But I couldn't rest, because if I stayed home, I wouldn't eat. So I went back to work the next day. When I came home that evening, something felt strange. There was a man sitting in the living room. He looked rich and confident. "This is Mr. Benson," Clara said. "He's a friend, a real man." Rose added, "Yes, unlike you, he can walk." I forced a smile. I greeted him. He barely looked at me. That night, Clara didn't come to our room. She stayed up laughing with Mr. Benson. I turned my face to the wall. My hands were shaking with quiet anger. The next morning, I rode out early and called Frank. "Get everything ready," I said. Frank paused. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "It's time." And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. Not because I was free, but because the end of their wickedness was finally near. That morning, I decided to end my silence. I didn't look like a man ready for revenge. I still wore the same faded orange sanitation uniform. My wheelchair still squeaked as I rode it across the rough pavement. My face still carried the tiredness of someone who hadn't slept on a real bed in weeks. But something had changed inside me. I was done being the silent victim. Frank had already done everything I asked. For weeks, he had quietly gathered every video I sent him from the wheelchair camera, organizing them, time-stamping them, making sure the audio was clean. I had told him to be patient, to let Clara and Rose fall so deep into the trap that when the truth came out, it would destroy the very throne they built on my pain. And now, they were close to the edge. That evening, when I returned from work, the lights were off. Not from a power outage, but because Rose didn't want to pay the electricity bill. She said it was my problem. "Go and generate light with your crippled hands," she had once hissed. I rode in quietly, hungry and soaked in rainwater. I noticed something unusual. The front door was slightly opened, and from inside I heard laughter, intimate laughter. I pushed the door and saw Clara on the couch. In her lap was Mr. Benson. His shoes were off, shirt unbuttoned. My heart paused. "Wait," Benson said, chewing. "What if your husband rolls in on his wheelchair?" Clara laughed. "Let him roll. Who cares? He should be lucky we haven't even sent him out yet." They both laughed like it was a joke. Behind them, Rose walked out from the hallway, saw me and said coldly, "You're back. Drop your broom outside, I beg. The living room is not your office." Clara looked up and saw me. "Oh, it's you," she said, wiping her hand like she had touched dirt. Benson stood up and walked past me. He didn't say a word. I wheeled myself into the bedroom without speaking, but I wasn't hot anymore. I was calm, too calm, because I knew what was coming next. The very next morning, I left early, not to sweep, but to meet Frank. He had rented a private lounge in a nearby hotel. Inside, 3 large screens displayed my life over the past few months. From the first day I entered the small house to the moment the soup was poured on my head, every insult, every slap, every wicked smile. I nodded. Perfect. Now, let's invite the guests. Frank raised an eyebrow. "You are sure?" "Send it," I said. "Let them walk straight into the fire." He hit a button on his laptop. Emails and messages were sent out to the media, to close business partners, to old friends, and most importantly, to my lawyer and private investigator. But I wasn't done. I needed to add a final piece to the puzzle, I said. That evening, I returned home and pretended to be even weaker. I acted like my body couldn't move properly and wheezed with every breath. Clara ignored me and her mother scolded. "What kind of dead weight is this? You are even worse than before, just rotting in our house." I looked down, holding back a grin. Clara suddenly said, "You know what? I've had enough. I'm going to Benson's place. He just got a new car." Her mother didn't stop her. Instead, she whispered something I'll never forget. "Don't come back home tonight. Let this one sleep in his own stench." Clara smiled and left. I waited a few hours. Then I took a small envelope from my inner pocket, wheeled into the kitchen and handed it to Rose. "What's this?" she snapped. "Small cash," I said, "from a friend. Just help me buy rice." Her eyes lit up. "How much?" "Just count it." She opened it. Inside was a bundle of cash. Real, fresh bills. Enough to make her forget all her senses. "Wait, your friend gave you this?" "Yes," I nodded. He said he felt sorry for me. She smiled. It was the first time I had seen her face since I arrived. "Well, At least someone still sees you as human, she muttered. I watched her stuff the cash inside her bra and walk out. As soon as she left, I grabbed my burner phone. Frank, it's time. The next morning, the entire city was talking. The news headlines read, "Shocking secret footage. Billionaire David Lawson faked disability to test wife's love. Domestic abuse, humiliation and betrayal caught on hidden camera. Wife caught cheating while husband pretended to be crippled." The story exploded. Frank has sent the footage to every major platform. A well-edited documentary version was already airing online with commentary, interviews from former workers, and side-by-side footage of the mansion days versus the slum life I endured. Social media was on fire. Justice served. That woman and her mother are devils. How can you do that to your own husband? The comment section was on fire. And that wasn't even the best part. Around 2 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Rose opened it only to find 3 plainclothes officers standing there. "Good afternoon," one said. "We have a warrant to seize and search this property related to fraud and identity theft. Are you Mrs. Rose?" She froze. Yes. Why?" The officer showed her a photo of Clara holding a shopping bag. This woman used a stolen ID to commit financial fraud. We traced the registration to this address. Before she could speak, Clara walked in through the gate, stunned by the crowd gathering around the house. "What's going on?" she asked. "You're under arrest," the officer said, stepping forward. "Me? For what?" "For stealing your husband's identity to open illegal credit accounts. We also have footage of you mocking and physically abusing a disabled man. That is felony harassment." "What? Who said that? Where's the evidence?" I rolled out slowly from the hallway. "I did." Clara's jaw dropped. Rose stumbled backward. "No, you are not crippled." I stood up from the wheelchair, slowly stretching my legs. I hadn't walked in public in months. "You lied to us, this boy!" Rose screamed. "No," I said calmly. "I tested you and you failed." Clara stared at me in disbelief. Her mouth was trembling and her voice was barely a whisper. "You can walk." I stood there, tall and steady, for the first time in front of her in months. The air around us felt heavy with shock. The entire compound was silent. Neighbors had gathered and the officers had paused. "I can walk," I said, "and I can see clearly now too." Clara's eyes darted from my face to the uniformed officers, then to the camera crews standing just behind them. Yes, Frank had invited the press. "You set us up," Rose shrieked. "You tricked us." "No," I replied calmly. "You exposed yourselves. I only gave you the stage." The police officers read Clara her rights. She resisted, screaming that she was innocent, that I was lying and that it was all fake. But the footage said otherwise. It was already everywhere. TV, social media, even WhatsApp groups. Every slap, every insult, every time she and her mother make me crawl for food like a dog. "Please, I'm your wife, don't do this," she cried, trying to grab my arm. I pulled my hand away. "You were never my wife, Clara. You were a tenant in my life and your rent expired the day I lost everything." They took her away in cuffs. The crowd outside clapped and some even cursed her, but I wasn't done. 2 days later, I held a press conference. This time I didn't wear a disguise. I wore a black suit, clean shave, and a face filled with calm power. The hall was packed with reporters and cameras. "I want to thank the people of Nigeria," I began, "for standing with me, believing the truth and sharing the story." I paused, then I added, "But I'm not here to speak about betrayal alone. I'm here to speak for every man or woman who has been mocked for being down, for every house help insulted for being poor, every spouse treated like trash when they could no longer provide." The room was silent and a few people were already in tears. "I was blessed with wealth," I said, "but cursed with a wife who only saw me as a bank account, a mother-in-law who saw my kindness as weakness. So I tested them and they failed. But the real victory is not in what I've regained, it's in what they lost." The reporters applauded and the story made headlines around the world. Legally, I pressed charges for identity theft, domestic abuse and emotional cruelty. Clara faced 5 years in prison. Rose faced 2 years. My lawyer made sure they would never touch my money or assets again. Every property document, every account, and every trust fund was sealed with new security measures. But I didn't stop there. I started a foundation, the Dignity Project. Its mission was to protect housemaids, domestic workers, and vulnerable spouses from emotional and physical abuse. We created emergency hotlines, free legal aids, rescue homes, and awareness campaigns. 1 year later, Clara was granted supervised parole to participate in a court-mandated counseling and community service. I personally requested for them to assign her to a woman's shelter where she would cook and clean for other women recovering from abuse. Rose, after serving time, returned to her village, her pride shattered and her mouth silenced. The same woman who once mocked my disability now limped from arthritis and walked with a cane. One day, I visited her local work area. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I walked in and saw Clara in an apron, sweeping the floor. Her face was stained and her hands pale. Her hair was no longer done in Brazilian curls, but wrapped in a faded scarf. She looked up and our eyes met. She dropped her broom. "You," she whispered. I looked at her for a moment. There was no anger left in me, only peace. "I hope you've learned something," I said. She nodded slowly, her eyes red. "I was blind. I was wrong. I'm sorry." "I know," I replied softly, "but some lessons are meant to be earned, not just spoken." I turned around and walked away. Now I live quietly in a peaceful estate, surrounded by real people. I don't throw parties anymore, and I don't care for designer watches or champagne pools. I wake up each morning, pray, cook my own food, and run my businesses from home. I'm dating again. Her name is Lydia. She runs a small orphanage and doesn't wear makeup too much. The first time I met her, she offered me water in a plastic cup and asked me how I was feeling, not what I owned. And that was enough for me to know I had found gold in the dirt. The moral lesson from David's story is that wealth reveals character, both yours and theirs. Don't confuse love for loyalty when money is involved. Power abused is always power lost. The way someone treats you when you are down is the way they feel truly about you. When people show you their true colors, believe them the first time. Never be afraid to walk away from disrespect, even if you are in a wheelchair. Thank you for watching this story. Please share your thoughts on what you've learned from this story in the comment section. Don't forget to like and share with your loved ones. Until I bring you another wonderful story, stay tuned.